Bierce's diaries in Dark Deception Chapter 4 reveal Bierce's desperation to get the Riddle of Heaven, her first moments in the ballroom prison, and her first attempts at escaping Malak. There's also a diary entry that includes spoilers for Chapter 5. But what do all of these new entries reveal about Bierce's backstory? Let's find out. Diary 1. Bierce seems to be in a bit of a panic in this entry. She's waiting for a package to arrive from the port of Los Angeles, which is most probably the Riddle of Heaven ring that she found out was in China or Tibet in the previous diaries. We learn that Bierce only has a few hours left before her soul is forfeited to Malak, and that he does everything in his power to delay her getting the ring. The clock chimes just as the ring arrives, suggesting that Bierce performs the ritual with the ring just in the nick of time. This diary entry is pretty straightforward, but I just want to emphasize something that's kind of interesting, and that is Malak has very limited power over the mortal realm. He tries to prevent Bierce from getting the Riddle of Heaven, but he just doesn't have the power to completely stop her. Diary 2. Bierce successfully performs the ritual with the Riddle of Heaven's power, but it seems to her that she gets teleported to her ballroom. Bierce quickly finds out that something is wrong when her maid doesn't answer her calls, and she notices that there are doors in the ballroom that she didn't remember seeing before. She goes through the doors in hopes of finding out what has happened to her. This diary entry describes the origins of Bierce's pocket dimension and the start of her journey to find the ring pieces. However, Malak interrupted Bierce's ritual and stole the ring from her, then separated the ring into pieces to make it harder for Bierce to find again. What is interesting is the mention of the multiple doors in the ballroom, where in the game we can only see one sealed by Malak's eye. It may just be that Bierce's pocket dimension is simplified in the game, as we learn more about the actual portals in the next diary entry. An interesting side note is that creating a pocket dimension takes a lot of energy out of the person performing the ritual, since Bierce was exhausted when she became conscious of where she was. Diary 3. Bierce believes that she died in the ritual and still has the will to get the better of Malak. She is determined to fight back, but knows that there's nothing that either of them can do to the other. Malak has hidden the ring pieces behind portals to Bierce's nightmares. Despite Bierce attempting to get the ring pieces back, it seems Malak has guarded them well with Bierce's worst nightmares, including Edgar, her late husband, wearing a diaper and a goat mask. I love this entry because it gives us so much information about the dynamic between Bierce and Malak, and it shares some of Bierce's psychology. Both Bierce and Malak are in a stalemate, meaning that they cannot really do anything to each other. If Bierce can retrieve the ring pieces, she wins. But the ring pieces are guarded by dangerous forms of her greatest fears, which can harm her and let Malak win. This forces Bierce to stay put, and Malak to stay on his guard. We learn that Bierce is deeply afraid of spiders, rats, and even Edgar wearing a diaper, which sounds funny at first but is quite scary if you consider how Doug's fears have been amplified in his nightmares. It also gives us a clue that the fears are represented by the monsters guarding the ring pieces themselves. So perhaps Doug really is afraid of monkeys, duckies, and statues. Something that I find curious about the past two diaries is who actually owns the Riddle of Heaven. Dialogue from characters like the Reaper nurses suggests that the ring pieces belong to Malak. On the other hand, the ring existed in the mortal realm, and it appeared that Malak wasn't able to guard it to the best of his ability. So is the Riddle of Heaven truly Malak's as they imbue the user with demonic powers? Or is it something that he claims ownership over after stealing it from Bierce? Perhaps the ring pieces have stolen Malak's powers as part of the ritual that Bierce performs, causing him to say that they are his belongings. After all, we know from E's notes that the monsters guarding the ring pieces are Malak's servants, so they could just be obeying his orders. Diary 4. Just a warning that this diary goes into spoiler territory for Chapter 5. A woman presents herself to Bierce, claiming to know who Bierce is. The woman says that she found Bierce's ring in a second-hand shop, unlocked Bierce's secret, and summoned her. Like Bierce, the woman says that she wants to become a star. So, Bierce sends the woman through one of the doors of the ballroom to collect a ring piece, but the woman gets torn apart in moments, turning into soul shards. This entry reveals a lot of conflicting information, but let's see if we can make sense of it. The woman specifically tells Bierce that she knows about a legend, which could potentially be the legend of the Riddle of Heaven. However, this could also have been a legend shared by Victor, who got Bierce into her predicament in the first place. Either way, Bierce sees the woman's determination to use Bierce's ring as foolish. Bierce claims that the ring would give her the power to grant the woman's wish to be a star, but it seems like she just says this in a way to get what she really wants: the ring pieces and a little bit of entertainment. Eerily, it's the same promise that Bierce makes to Doug Hauser at the beginning of Dark Deception, which potentially shares some more interesting information on what is going on here. Given that Bierce gets visitors from the mortal realm who want their wishes granted, perhaps Bierce has become the gatekeeper to making a deal with Malak. We know the woman in the diary entry got Bierce's ring secondhand, and we know that Doug performed a blood ritual on his deathbed during his fight with cancer. While Malak hints that Doug may have found out about the ritual online, both Doug and the woman may have found out about the ritual where your wish is granted from Victor. But who is Victor? And who is the woman? I have a feeling that some think of Victor as Malak's mortal form, where he simply doesn't have powers he has in the purgatory that Bierce talks about. However, perhaps Victor is simply someone knowledgeable about the supernatural who may have summoned Malak in the first place. After Victor helps Bierce with the ritual, he goes completely missing, suggesting that he didn't want anything to do with the consequences to follow, including Malak being summoned. Victor might even be someone who made a deal with Malak and made it out alive, but this seems like a bit of a stretch. Besides, Victor's disappearance could be Malak's inability to keep his form in the mortal realm. As for the woman, I think they could be one of two people at the moment. One could simply be a random person without the grit to survive Malak's nightmares, and the other could be E. E is a character introduced in the remastered version of Dark Deception, which went live on the release of Chapter 4. She was referenced by Bierce as being a clever girl who disappointed her just before Doug arrived. While Bierce thinks that E died, she really gets access to one of Malak's relics that allow her to move between nightmares, leaving the tablet that Doug uses behind. It's difficult to say whether this could be though, since the soul shards let off tiny screams, but Bierce has never given us indication that she knows whose soul the shards belong to. Besides, even if the shards belong to E, they could be a consequence of using Malak's relic to travel between nightmares. E does report that the relic slowly consumes the user's soul in her crazy carnival note. This gets me thinking about Bierce's true motives. In Chapter 4, we end up seeing some moving cutscenes where Bierce genuinely seems to want to help Doug. However, she could just be putting on an act since she was so close to getting all the ring pieces with Doug, and Malak's entrance into the pocket dimension completely threw off the stalemate that she had with Malak. Bierce could be acting, but we have to remember that she was an awful actor who only got her way through Malak's powers in the mortal realm. If Bierce wasn't honest in her promise to Doug, then she may just be using Doug to get the ring pieces, flee from Malak, and leave Doug just where she was. At the moment, I don't see that making complete sense, as it seems she could just free them both and overthrow Malak with the ring. But we have to consider any kind of curveball that Glowstick Entertainment throws at us. Besides, we have to remember that Dark Deception is a trilogy, so we also need to consider where the story will go after Doug's and Bierce's stories conclude, or continue. Subscribe